If you're watching this video, then you're probably connected to the World Wide Web. But what is the World Wide Web and how did we get here? Well, a lot of people falsely believe that the internet and the World Wide Web are the same thing, and that could not be further from the truth. The internet is the protocol that the World Wide Web sits on top of, so the internet protocol supports the World Wide Web, but it is not the same thing. The internet is like, imagine you take a sports arena like Madison Square Garden. A lot of different sports can be played at Madison Square Garden. You can play basketball, you can play hockey, you can have indoor lacrosse. So the World Wide Web is essentially like one of the sports that you can play at Madison Square Garden. And Madison Square Garden would be the internet protocol. But you can also play something like email or voice over IP, which is how Discord and Skype and those services work. FTP, SSH, even Minecraft are all examples of things that sit on top of the internet protocol. The internet protocol was invented in 1974, whereas the World Wide Web was invented in 1990. So what was going on in those 16 years without the World Wide Web? Well, in today's video, I'll show you. So we'll start with what was happening even before the internet protocol. One of the biggest networks back in the day, Arpanet, was created in 1969 by an agency named ARPA, which was funded by the Department of Defense to make sure the US was staying ahead in tech. This network allowed researchers and universities to share computers easily and remotely. ARPANET was essentially as simple as being able to access another computer from your own. The network was primarily used to transfer files, read mailing lists, and then eventually send email. It was originally meant to be nuclear-proof, which meant if parts of the system were destroyed, it could still continue to function. It was a very key platform, and it actually led to the creation of email. Email was really useful at the time because it allowed people to communicate without having to be online at the same machine at the same time. By the mid-70s, email was the biggest source of traffic on Arpanet. The service officially shut down in 1990, but email is still used all over the globe today. Around the same time, there was another network called Telnet. Telnet was great because it was widely used by a variety of users and was not a closed system like Arpanet was. It was very similar to Arpanet or even modern day SSH in the sense that you were essentially connecting to another computer. While Arpanet was only available to university researchers and people who got access, Telnet was completely decentralized, meaning anybody could use it. It is one of the earliest networks that really starts to resemble the World Wide Web. And SSH is ultimately the reason that Telnet fell out of favor, because Telnet was completely unencrypted and SSH just had way better security. That brings us to Usenet, which was created in 1980. Usenet was started as a text sharing protocol very similar to Reddit and was divided into newsgroups, which are very similar to subreddits. The main difference here is that Usenet had servers that hosted newsgroups, meaning it was more or less decentralized. Servers could decide to share data with each other, but they didn't necessarily have to. That meant depending on what server you chose, you may or may not be able to talk to your friend on Usenet. Reddit, on the other hand, is hosted completely by the Reddit Corporation, meaning it is very centralized. The newsgroups were divided into names that resemble domain names today. Examples include rec.windsurfing, alt.binaries. The newsgroups were divided into 8 main hierarchies, as well as a 9th alt dot. In these hierarchies, each subsequent word, which was separated by a dot, further subdivided the category. If you wanted to make a new group in any of the 8 main hierarchies, you had to ask the admins. However, for the 9th .alt, any server could decide what kind of content went on those. Usenet is still very much around today, and ironically enough, it's in large part due to alt dot. The platform is mostly used for pirating movies and software and TV shows nowadays. The next protocol I want to talk about is Gopher. Gopher was released to the public in 1991, which is almost at the exact same time as the World Wide Web. Originally, it was actually more popular than the World Wide Web. At its peak, they had hundreds of thousands of users, and many people's first experiences with the internet are through Gopher, not the World Wide Web. It was also extremely similar to the web. For example, instead of websites, they were Gopher holes. Instead of Google or a search engine, they had Veronica 2. Instead of HTTP, it was Gopher. Instead of HTML, you had Gopher maps. So even though there are some clear differences between Gopher and the web, you could definitely see why it was very popular back in the 90s. The reason it fell out of favor compared to the web was because it was more rigid than the web because it was very heavily text-based. This is because at the time, computers that only supported text-based terminals were very popular. Gopher holes looked very similar to each other. You also could not embed images, you could only provide image downloads, which made Gopher holes only look more similar. Gopher also had a very hierarchical structure as opposed to the web, which didn't have the restriction. Really, the common theme for why Gopher fell out of favor compared to the web was because of its lack of extensibility. HTML allowed site creators to be more creative and have more options as to how they want to display their content. Another huge reason Gopher fell out of favor was because in February of 1993, the University of Minnesota, which created Gopher, announced that it would charge licensing fees for the use of its implementation. 2 months later, in April of 1993, the World Wide Web became public domain. This allowed the World Wide Web to explode in popularity and absolutely surpass Gopher and eventually effectively kill it. You can still access Gopher to this day, however, it's become more or less niche. I use links whenever I want to go on Gopher, and you can still go to Veronica 2 and search for content. I mean, you can see how outdated it is. Some of these articles from 2006, some of them from 1999, but it's really cool that you can still browse through what is essentially a relic of the internet. All these different networks and protocols that I talked about in this video have all culminated to the creation and flourishment of the web. I think it's great to look back at the history and see how we got here. Now go on and keep enjoying the World Wide Web and have a great day.